I'm here with Chris Brandolino, who is the principal scientist forecasting and media for Niwa. Kia ora, Chris, and welcome.
Oh, kia ora. Thanks for having me on.
Chris, these days with climate change, obviously we're seeing unusual weather all the time on a sort of weekly, monthly basis and that. And now we've had quite a wet time here in Hawke's Bay. What does the summer hold for us going forward?
Well, we haven't issued our summer outlook officially quite yet. That'll come at the end of November. But I think if you were to use the current outlook, which covers November, December, and January, so 2 months of summer, it looks like we'll find a tendency for above average temperature. So basically, when you look at the 3 month period in totality as a whole, we think Hawke's Bay will have above average temperatures and probably below normal rainfall. It doesn't mean there won't be cool periods. In fact, there probably will be some cool periods. It doesn't mean there won't be rain. Of course, there will be rain, but I don't think we'll find a summer like we found last summer, where we see well above average, well above normal rain, and probably even too much rain for a lot of folks.
Yeah. So what is the weather phenomenon that's hitting us? It is El Nino. What is it that's coming?
Yeah. So look, it isn't like El Nino comes and like an El Nino announces it's here by opening the door and welcoming itself to the party. El Nino is what we call a climate driver, and a climate driver basically is who's steering Mother Nature's car, who's behind the wheel. And El Nino is at the driving wheel, and El Nino is at the driver's seat. So El Nino is going to influence our weather. Additionally, so is El Nino's cousin. El Nino has a cousin in the Indian Ocean. It's called the Indian Ocean Dipole, a little bit more, I guess, less mainstream in terms of its notoriety and people being aware of it, but it is an important climate driver, the Indian Ocean Dipole. And those two will team up to influence our weather over the coming months. And when you look back historically, what El Nino means for Hawke's Bay is that we find generally winds coming from the west, even northwest, more than usual. And because of that, that tends to give us a chance for seeing higher chances for periods of hot spells or hot weather, as well as drier weather. But what's different this year is that this is a different flavor of El Nino. Typically, when you look at El Nino, if you were to look at ocean temperatures in the Pacific Ocean, along the equator, say east of Fiji, toward the Galapagos Islands, in South America, the water is unusually warm. And that's what we see now. However, historically, you would find on the other end of the spectrum, toward Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, north of Australia, you would find the water is unusually cool. And because of that setup, unusually warm water east, unusually cool water west, again, this is along the equator in the Pacific.
Yeah.
That would basically have a flow-on effect to give us more west winds. However, this year it's different. That water, say to the west, say near Indonesia, particularly toward north of Australia, Papua New Guinea, the water's not unusually cool like it typically is in El Nino. It's still pretty warm. And that's a function of climate change, but that is very different from what we saw in previous strong El Ninos, 1997, 1982. So that's a bit of a weather wild card, I should say. We have to keep our eye on is how does that kind of atypical setup or configuration, how is that going to manifest or express itself with our day-to-day weather? Unfortunately, we don't have many examples in the past to draw upon to try to understand and give us some insight. So we often like to say, we know the average outcome of El Nino. You can look back at all the El Nino episodes and see what the average is. However, no El Nino is average. They all have their own different personality and different lean and different flavor. And I think that statement is especially true this year because of that warmer than usual water that's north of Vanuatu, north of Fiji, kind of over toward Australia and the Coral Sea. Because that water is unusually warm and not unusually cool, like it should be during El Nino, that probably will mean some different sort of outcomes than maybe what we've seen in the past. So while I guess what I'm saying is while we have above average temperatures through January and below normal rainfall through January in Hawke's Bay, we'll see if that continues to hold as we progress through the coming weeks when we update our outlook next month or in very early December when we issue our official summer outlook.
Now, this February obviously was a February like not many of us had experienced here in Hawke's Bay, going back many years. Cyclone Gabriel came and we had more rain than we could handle. So do you think it's going to be a very different summer, different February for us this time?
I do. I think that, look, we do have to watch the tropics. We've already had 2 tropical cyclones this season. It's only November, and we're less than 3 weeks into the season. That's unusual. In fact, the second named tropical cyclone we had is we had a category 5 and about 2 weeks ago. That was Lola. We now have tropical cyclone Mel. This is the second tropical cyclone, as I said, of the season in the Southwest Pacific, and it's the earliest in the season that we've had this number 2 in terms of a tropical cyclone since 1997, 1998. That too was a strong El Nino year, by the way.
Yeah.
So we have to watch the tropics. I think the odds would favor a month in February that's likely to be warm and dry, but that weather wild card, that warm water north of Fiji, north of Vanuatu, that could be kind of a genesis or a hot spot or a breeding ground. We've already seen 2 tropical cyclones form in that area, and we could see that theme kind of reoccurring. So it's one thing to get some low or tropical cyclone developing in that region, but where does it travel? Now, last year when we had La Nina, which is the opposite, that promoted a weather setup where those tropical cyclones or ex-tropical cyclones, or simply just the moisture, forget about any organized low, where we had more of a connection to the tropics last year with La Nina. And therefore, we had kind of increased odds. We were loading the dice for those sorts of outcomes to get rain from the subtropics and tropics. With El Nino, we are reducing those odds for something to come down. So again, it's one thing if something forms to our north, but it's another thing is, well, where does it go? Does it stay out to sea? Does it not go to the south and kind of, fall apart, disintegrate, so to speak? Or does it move south? And because of El Nino, the odds of those moving south, they are reduced, but they are not zero. So I realize I'm kind of speaking out of 2 sides of my mouth. On the one side, I'm saying, hey, odds would favor, dryness and warmth. But on the other side of my mouth, I'm saying, look, that's true, but we have to keep an eye to the north for the tropics because it just takes one. As we know, it just takes one. And that changes the whole, you could have, look, this February is a leap year, so there's 29 days. You could have 24, 25 days where, that dry and warm theme is kind of met. But then you get 2 or 3 days where you get some really heavy rain and bad weather because maybe something dropped in from the north. Obviously, that didn't define the entire month, but it certainly, made a big statement, and people will probably remember that more than anything.
Yeah.
So that would be my message as we kind of work our way through the summer season, not just for February, but for the summer and even into the autumn full stop.
And now, obviously, most of us enjoy having nice warm weather and that, but our region, obviously, we grows, and that. What can they expect? I mean, is it going to be drought conditions, or is that too strong a term?
Yeah, look, we don't predict drought at 3 months ahead. We're working toward it, but we're not there yet. I would say that what would be good for farmers or anyone who relies on steady rain, even if you're simply on tank water, for example. If you type in Niwa, Niwa, and type in SCO, Seasonal Climate Outlook, so type in Niwa and word, or the 3 letters SCO, 2 separate words, you'll be directed, as I'm looking at it right now on my page, on my monitor, you'll be directed to a website which has our long-term forecast or outlooks for the next 3 months. But in addition to that, you will see something we call the drought forecasting dashboard. This is a really good tool, and we've worked with MPI, the Ministry for Primary Industries, on this. And what this is a tool to help people understand rainfall themes over the next 5 weeks, 35 days. And not only rainfall themes, but we explicitly attempt to predict dryness and even drought. So it's kind of an early detection or an early heads up where you can, I'm looking at it now, where you can try to understand what the kind of themes will be over the next, say, 5 weeks. And you can drill down, as I am right now, and you can look at Hawke's Bay, or kind of look at eastern parts of the North Island and kind of focus on that area. And as I look at this, here we are in mid-November. There is a likelihood that as we work our way into, toward a month from now, say mid-December, maybe a week or two before Christmas, that we'll probably be seeing dryness emerge in Hawke's Bay, Taraffet, Gisborne, and in your neck of the woods. Whether or not that actually develops into drought, we'll have to see. But I think, using that term again, the odds, or loading the dice, we are loading the dice for certain outcomes. When our wind favors the west and northwest, we tend to be dry. If we're going to get wet weather, the air's got to come from the ocean.
Yeah.
So that means either an easterly or a southeasterly or a northeasterly or something like that. But if the wind's coming from the land, we're really, really reducing those odds. So I would say it's certainly worth monitoring. It's certainly worth keeping an eye on. And this is, as I mentioned, that tool, the drought forecasting dashboard. It's a really good way to kind of give you at least a few weeks notice. And look, it's updated every day and things may change, but at least you can understand, what 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, is Mother Nature going to have a dry lean? Is Mother Nature going to have a wet lean? Or is it going to be maybe kind of a normal lean, if that makes sense? So I would definitely use that tool to help plan and prepare. And basically, as we'd like to tell people, luck favors the prepared. So this is one way to kind of maybe get some insight as to what Mother Nature may be thinking over the next month.
Yeah. And I know, as you say, you can't predict too far ahead, but a few years ago, we had what seemed to be like a drought in winter, because it just stretched on right into almost June and that. What are the chances, looking now, just with what you've got, that we could have an extended period like that?
Yeah, look, El Nino is expected to have a firm grip on the steering wheel right into autumn. In fact, could be through autumn.
Yeah.
And if that were the case, we could be looking at, a prolonged period of dryness, potentially well into the autumn season. So that may be good for maybe, vineyards that grow the grapes for the wine. Yeah. They like it creates a nice vintage potentially. But at the same time, there's a balance to be had, of having not too little rainfall. So, like, to answer your question, if dryness does kick in, and dare I say, even if drought does kick in, the odds are certainly elevated that could persist well into autumn, because of El Nino expected to persist and have that steering grip, a firm grip on the steering wheel right into autumn, being that climate driver. Again, I'll go back to that weather wild card, though. We have to watch the tropics, because it's likely to be a busy tropical cyclone season to the north. And if you get one slipping through, coming down south, that changes the calculus. That changes things. And put it this way. Last summer, we could rely on having input or connection to the tropical north in the form of moisture and rain. That was something that was quite reliable. This year, I don't think we can rely on a tropical connection. I think it's still possible, but to actually rely on it, I think is something it's just probably not a good thing to do, because we're in a different situation than we were last year. We're not in La Nina, we're in El Nino.
Yeah. Almost finished, but you were one of the few people that actually got Cyclone Gabriel correct, predicting it, and that. What can we learn from Cyclone Gabriel? Yeah, in Hawke's Bay.
I think it's a really good reminder to have a plan, whether it's for drought or whether it's for flash flooding. I think it's a good reminder that Mother Nature is very powerful. the amount of rain that fell within a couple of days, 4, 5, 600 millimeters, absolutely incredible. And I think it's again, I use the word reminder that unfortunately, and it doesn't have to be from a tropical cyclone or an ex-tropical cyclone. I think it's a reminder that extreme weather events like that was experienced in Auckland for the Auckland anniversary flooding, or whether it's the heavy rain from Gabrielle or any ex-tropical cyclone, it's a reminder that these extreme events are going to become more common, more likely, and more extreme. And I think, that will happen even in my lifetime and your lifetime. We're seeing that happen, but I think that'll be especially true for the generation before us. So, what we define as a significant or an extreme weather event today, unfortunately, probably in 50 years, 40 years, 80 years from now, that won't be considered extreme. It'll probably be more pedestrian and more kind of typical, I suppose, just because our Earth is warming, and when you have a warmer Earth, water is more likely to be in its vapor state, and water vapor is fuel for rain.
Yeah.
So I think Gabrielle is a reminder, unfortunately, that extreme weather events are going to become more likely, more frequent, and more intense in the coming years and decades. And events like the Auckland anniversary, events like Gabrielle, those are kind of aligned with our expectations in terms of what to expect in the future.
And now an important question, what can we expect for Christmas Day? Are we going to be on the beach with our barbecues or what?
Look, I'm always an optimistic person, all right? So there's my bias. Having said that, I think for folks in Hawke's Bay, and for that matter, much of the North Island, I'm going to keep with that theme of dry and settled and warm. But let me give you an analogy. When it comes to long-range predictions, we call that climate forecasting. In fact, that's what Niwa's 3-month outlook is called, the seasonal climate outlook. Climate is like your personality. Weather is like your mood. So you can define someone's personality. Oh, Bob or Tui or Sally, their personality, they're easygoing, they're relaxed, they're really chill. But you can catch that person on any given day, and their mood may be completely opposite of that. So what I'm defining to you for the Christmas period is that right now, because of El Nino, the personality is going to favor overall dry and settled conditions, perhaps even windy. I should say windy. That's a potential. We'll call it dry and warm, maybe not settled, because if it's windy, you could argue that's not settled. But we could see a different mood that day, and it could be completely incongruent with the personality. Hopefully that's useful.
Yeah, well,
but I'm going for dry and warm. That's what I'm going for. Full stop.
Well, hopefully the weather's in a good mood on Christmas Day. That'll be good. Chris, that
would be good.
Chris Brandolino, thank you so much for your time, and all the best, and have a good summer break, and we'll speak to you again sometime.
Look forward to it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.